So let's talk a little bit about what culture is and what I mean by culture for this presentation. Culture is not just something like saying I'm white, I'm African American, I'm Jewish, I am Mormon or LDS. It's more than that. Culture is so many things. It can be traditions or practices that your family has. It could be a tribe or clan. It could be a race or an ethnicity. It could also be a religion or spirituality or a particular church. It could be something unique to your location or region. For example, something in Utah culture that we have is the term sloughing for missing school or cutting classes. It's always a term I have to correct myself on when I'm out of state. Some of our, culture is also some of our food in Utah, like funnel potatoes. But it could also be culture with a club or an institution. So maybe a bikers club, or maybe some of the practices you have as a member of DECA or FBLA. It could be a workplace that practice, a union or a professional group. Teachers have their own unique culture. They also have a union, but so do plumbers. Completely different cultures with some similarities. Same with hobbies or interests. If you're someone that's into the ham radio community, if you're someone that's really into anime or into the furry community, all these things have culture with them. So we're not narrowing it down to one particular culture type, all culture. And a lot of this is going to be about workplace culture. So our culture in our workplace. So like at Blomquist Tale, we have our own culture. That's one of the reasons we got voted one of the, I believe, the best small company. And that was last year, I think it was. So just some examples of what I talked about. We got some veterans here. These are Utah veterans, by the way. We got a Utah Union in the other corner. We got one of our local motorcycle clubs in another corner. We got some religious representation. We got an amazing dancer from last year's Cultural Traditions, Living Traditions Festival. And we got some folks from Walmart, which has its own unique culture. Walmart's not one of our companies that we work with, but they do have a culture. So, some cultural mourning rituals, some of which you might have heard of. So, in Native American culture, it's very common to cut your hair short as a sign of mourning. If you guys saw me a couple years ago, my hair was up to my chin because I'd had so many relatives pass in such a short time frame. In Greece, it's common for some folks to avoid shaving for 40 days as part of their mourning. Now, when I talk about culture, like I said earlier, someone in that culture may practice this tradition, some may not. Community funerals. What I mean by that is sometimes you will find an entire community comes out for a funeral. So on Native reservations in the US of A, we have a lot of Native American culture where people will all come to the funeral. The entire tribe, the entire clan will come in small communities. So I worked up in Alaska. In some of those little rural villages, we shut down the entire village for a funeral because everyone wants to be there to pay their respects. You can still find that even in small communities here in Utah, where really someone passing can have such an impact. The entire community is going to be there, and we might have to shut down a lot of services for that particular day. It's also important to recognize that not everyone attends funerals for a close relation, but still might be meaningful. Someone that maybe is a great uncle, but was more family to you than your actual uncle or parent, even. Folks that have a best friend that's as close to them as a sibling. And so being at their funeral is very, very important. Sometimes it's even someone that you don't have any relation with, but something that means a lot to you. When former President Jimmy Carter passed away, a lot of people really wanted time for mourning. That's one of the reasons we had a lot of exceptions for federal offices, especially to say, hey, take the day. And it's important to recognize that sometimes these meaningful relationships aren't a close relation legally. Some mourning rituals are festive or joyful, Irish wakes, some have really big celebrations of life. Some cultures wear black, some wear white, some wear their hair styled a certain way to show their mourning. Mourning is part of what we do as humans to put action to our feelings so people can see what we're feeling. Our next presentation in a couple months will be on mourning rituals specifically. Shiva is a tradition in some Jewish families where for 7 days they do not take visitors, they do not go out. Not everyone practices this, but some do. Avoiding social events, some have special meals, some have duties that they must do for the dad or the family. Some do not cry or express any emotion, do not stop going to work. Everything must go as planned. Some have their own traditions on cremation, not cremation. Utah, it's very important for us to have viewing, so that's something we do a lot here in our culture. Dia de los Muertos is a great tradition that's practiced in Mexico, but there's not one way to mourn. And these are all things we have to think about when we're in the workplace about what someone might need if they're grieving to mourn properly. So, for example, I have a staff member who, for 7 days, can't be leaving home. Well, I need to take that into consideration. What if I have a staff member who lost that second cousin, but that second cousin was their closest relative? These are tricky things to navigate. I'm not going to tell anyone how to write your policies for your workplace. That's so not my right. But it's something to consider with your own workplace, your own colleagues, your own supervisees. So, company culture is shared workplace stuff. So, things like how we dress, our practices, our values, our history. I know here at Blomquist Hale, we keep our values in every office. If you ask, you'll find a picture somewhere that shows our values. It's something that we like to practice and carry with us. Same with how we dress, what we believe about mental health. These are things we share. But within that, we also have our own things. I'm a therapist that's lived in different states. I have all my own stuff with my history, my education, my own faith, all these things that I bring to Blomquist Hale, as do my colleagues. And so that becomes part of Blomquist Hale's culture. And it's a wonderful thing. And hopefully in your company, wherever you work, you recognize where that culture shows at your workplace. Now, some companies are more open to sharing than others. Some have a more fun culture, some don't. Every company's different. But I'd like you to consider as we're talking during this presentation, how have you been impacted by your company's culture? And how do you impact the culture of your company? So these are examples of where workplace culture and grief collide. The one that says a case for statutory miscarriage bereavement, unfortunately, that is not the US. That is a UK news heading. That was from Parliament. So they are actually working on bereavement leave for miscarriage, which is a wonderful change. I really, really wish we had that as a law here in the US. Some of these you might have seen. We have this state employee who was trying to get paid bereavement leave that would go a little longer because they'd lost a child. And so they were fighting the law to try to get more. We got a Chicago flight attendant also fighting for more sick leave, in this case through their workplace policies, not any particular state laws. And I also bring up, because we're talking about workplace culture, last year you guys might have heard about the Wells Fargo employee who was found dead at her desk. That speaks to culture and how much it can hurt. I know a lot of folks that were coming to see us during that time period were talking about how upsetting that was for them. I'm wondering, would my workplace notice? Would my family notice? How long would someone leave me? It's a really upsetting thought. And I really hope that that's something that that particular Wells Fargo location worked on. We would never want our work culture to say, hey, we won't even notice if you passed away at your desk. That's a horrible message. We all have that responsibility to make sure our workplace culture isn't like that. So these are some good questions to ask about workplace culture with grief. If you're trying to look at your own, whether you're a supervisor or someone that's in an employee setting, do you have the kind of culture where you feel comfortable even saying, I'm grieving, I'm struggling? And it doesn't have to be a grief of a loss, such as a death. In some of my other presentations, I talked about loss with loss of job, divorce, sometimes a major change in your life, like your kids moving out. Sometimes it's really hard to feel comfortable workplace saying, I'm having a hard time. My marriage is on the rocks and I'm not focusing. My teenager is acting out and we are now disconnected. My kid's moving out and now I feel like I don't have any meaning and purpose. So everything's about work. These are real griefs. But do we feel comfortable telling our workplace about that? Do we feel comfortable requesting time off? How hard is it to do? For some folks, it's as simple as saying, hey, boss, I need time off. For others, it's, oh, can you get coverage? Well, we only cover this much. One of the things I found in my research is the average, at least in the US, is 3 to 5 days of bereavement leave. Now, some places it's consecutive, as in you have to take it all together. Some you can spread it out. Some it has to be a close relative. Some it doesn't matter. The biggest I've seen, and this shocked me actually, was Discover Card gives 20 days of bereavement leave for a close relative. I've actually never heard of a place doing that, so that was a huge shock for me. But these are one of those barriers in a workplace. It's very hard because a lot of folks will say, hey, I need the time, but your workplace policy might not cover that. And that speaks to the culture of your workplace. If someone asks for time off, especially for a good reason, how supportive is your workplace? How supportive are your coworkers? I hope you haven't experienced it. I've certainly worked at places where I've said, hey, I need time off. Can you cover this for me? Can you take over this meeting? Can you do this? And I've had places where someone's, oh, well, I don't know why you need the time off or being difficult about it. Now, never hear Blomquist tale. I work at a good place. But yeah, I definitely worked at places where that's the thing. If you need time off, you get a lot of crap with it. So sometimes it's not worth asking for the time off. Is it easy or difficult to tell your boss you're struggling and may need time off or leniency in your duties? Sometimes if you're grieving, even if you're up for coming to work, your ability to do the job might be impacted. And some supervisors, some workplaces have some flexibility and some understanding, some don't. I've definitely provided counseling and I've known people who they start to grieve, they're struggling to work, their performance dips, they get put on a PIP, a employee improvement plan, and before they know it, they're fired. That is awful. It really upsets me. It's just a human being and as a counselor, but absolutely happens. So, what are some of the things that grief does? It can make us forgetful, make us tired. It can make us have struggle interacting with people. Now, y'all probably work in a lot of different places, but if you work with the public in any way, and odds are a lot of you do, it's very hard to be patient and tolerant and have that customer service attitude if inside you're dealing with grief and pain, especially because, well, the public's not always the nicest or understanding. We've all been there. I'm sure all of you have examples, but doing that with grief, really, really hard. Being able to keep track of things, being able to be focused in meetings, difficult. Sometimes it's just hard to get out of bed and get to work on time. Sometimes it's just our feelings. Sometimes it's duties at home. If I've lost a spouse and I have kids at home, I'm having to take on double duty. That's extremely difficult to adjust to. If I've had a parent pass and now I'm taking care of the other parent, that's a lot to take on financially, emotionally. And most of us can't just miss work, so we keep going. But we're not doing as well, and we know we're not. It's a very tricky situation. Some folks have increased sensitivity or trigger situations. Some of the medical folk I work with, for example, if they've recently had a loss, helping other people with their loss can become really hard. If you've recently had a miscarriage or lost a baby, if you're seeing a baby at your work, you may be impacted. If you work in marriage in some way, maybe wedding planning or somehow in helping couples, and you're going through a rough time with your marriage, even a divorce, ugh, your tolerance for that might not be so good. You might be really triggered and unable to do the job. Why do people not just take the time off? Well, like I talked about earlier, sometimes they can't take the PTO. Maybe it's because of bereavement leave policy. Maybe they can't afford to. Maybe the funeral's far, far away, and so they're like, why bother? Sometimes you can't get coverage. A lot of folks will tell me, I don't want to be at home right now. It's all pain, it's all sadness, it's a reminder of what I've lost. They want to work. I get that. I'm sometimes one that goes, no, I don't want to deal with my pain. I want to go to work and help other people with their pain. Personal flaw. But that also might mean, again, you're not doing as good a job as you could. Some people keep going to work because they want routine and normalcy when their world seems to have turned upside down. Some want social interaction. Some employees, well, they may have lost that person as their person outside of work. And so they don't have a loved one at home and they don't want to be alone in their head. So even though they're not feeling well, they're coming to work because they need that social interaction. There's also a lot of social pressure not to miss work. Certain cultures, it's unheard of. You do not miss work. You go no matter what. There's not a funeral today or something you have to be at. Your job is important. And I don't necessarily even mean culture in the race ethnicity way. Some of that might be your generation. It might be your family's culture. I know lots of folks will tell me, well, my dad would never miss work for nothing. He was there no matter how sick, no matter what happened. I know folks that will tell me that there's pressure to be at work because there's not coverage. And so socially, they feel like I have to be there or I'm some sort of jerk. And these are all things that keep people coming to work, even if they know that they're not doing the job well, they're struggling, and maybe they need to be at home or with family and friends. These are all very valid reasons. When you build a supportive work culture, when you have a workplace that feels kind, supportive, it makes a world of difference. Now, you have to do it within your policies, it's true, but there's a lot of ways to make sure that culture is felt because this is the thing that makes employees want to be at work, feel that their workplace is loyal to them, and they want to be loyal back. It's a hard thing to make happen these days. But particularly, some of the research shows that women, especially, will pick a workplace or judge a workplace on how much bereavement leave they can have. It's a really important consideration. I know that when I lost three grandparents in a row, I'm very lucky to work at a workplace that was very understanding and flexible with me. It's one of the things that makes me very loyal to where I work, is that consideration. And we're going to get a little into what kind of things we can do as employees or employers. With that in mind, let's talk a little bit about taboo grief, just briefly. So these are taboo griefs, griefs that are hard to talk about, griefs that might be upsetting, griefs that we avoid maybe bringing up in the workplace. The problem with that is if you avoid acknowledging these griefs, you may be causing harm. You may be hurting someone that's genuinely grieving. It is hard to talk about suicide, miscarriage, loss of a child, maybe someone who's had a child or spouse go missing. These are really difficult things. Talking to a coworker about their child who died of an overdose, it's really tough. Someone that became disabled. But if we avoid discussing these things, we're making the workplace an unsafe place. We're saying your feelings are not welcome here. What you're feeling and dealing with at home does not matter. And that is never the message you want to send in a workplace. So if you're a supervisor, here's some advice on what things you can do to help. If you have a supervisee who's had a loss, do respect their privacy. Just legally and policy-wise, you have to. You need to make sure that they're okay with, I want my colleagues to know what's going on. I don't. If they say they're not, it is important to respect that. Some employees really do like things like flowers, cards, calls from colleagues. Some really, really don't. As a supervisor, it's your role to navigate that. You can't put that on an employee. You have to ask the employee that's grieving, hey, what do you need? Now, if they say they're one that I'm okay with people knowing, make sure it's not a hush hush topic. If you avoid talking about it, it again sends the message that you don't care. You do got to work with your policies. Everyone's policies are different. Yep, I see a question there on what are best practices for creating a supportive environment. We're going to get a little into that. Not as much as I'd like, but we're going to get a little into that. So you're going to want to work within your policies. And I know that can suck because maybe you work in a place where policies don't work as well for what your employee needs or your supervisee needs. It's still important to make sure that employee feels heard and cared for. Grief does not have a timeline, so sometimes your employee will be just fine working right now, right after the death or loss, but maybe on the anniversary of the death, maybe on the anniversary of their wedding or a birth, maybe they're going to really struggle that day, that week. Sometimes it can change them forever, and there will always be that impact. You got to ask about their specific needs. Every person's different. I gave lots of examples of different cultural needs to keep in mind. So this person might go, hey, I need to go away for a week to be able to do all the things I need to do. You gotta look at your policies. Let's see what you can make happen. If your employee feels heard, even if you're saying, hey, let me see what I can do, it's a great start. And always be genuine. I know that for some of us it feels uncomfortable, but it's always important to be genuine and check in with that employee. Do offer to help. Listen to what they would like help with. Don't assume you know what they need or what would be helpful. Do offer to help with shift or duties. Even talk to the supervisor about helping. Don't assume they want you to take over a shift. Sometimes people do really want to work for all those reasons I listed. Do be willing to listen to stories or feelings. Don't tell them how to grieve or focus on your own grief story. Sometimes when someone's grieving, we feel some of our grief and we want to talk about our grief. And there's a space for that, but not with someone that's currently grieving. They're not in a place to be a support for you. So this is a question I actually got just as I was putting this together. What if I have something to celebrate? So I just had a coworker that lost a baby. I have a coworker that's going through a divorce, but I have a wedding announcement. I have a baby being born. Can we still have these events? Absolutely. You don't have to cancel or avoid talking about it. That can not only hurt the person who's grieving, it can hurt everyone else and cause some really interesting dynamics of conflict in your workplace. But do check in with the person who's grieving. See if they're willing to be accommodating, see what they can do. And it might be, hey, we're having a baby shower for so and so. Do you maybe want to skip it? You don't have to come if it's going to be too hard, but we'd like you there if you want to be there. Something like that can go a long way. If it's something that they haven't shared with their coworkers, that might be up to a supervisor to navigate that. Of saying, hey, I happen to know that we're doing a baby shower for so and so. I know you haven't told everybody about your miscarriage. How are you feeling? How can I support you? It goes a long, long way. So if you've had that kind of thing happen at work, it's really important to still have those events. If you are having a birth in your workplace, but you had someone that lost someone to a baby to a miscarriage, you want to navigate that with respect. And so as a supervisor or as an employee, you need to check in with that person who's grieving. And so that could be talking to them about, hey, we're having a baby shower for so and so. Do you want to participate? If you don't want to, we'll understand. We won't be offended. But you need to ask. Don't assume. Because if you just say, oh, well, we'll have the baby shower, but we won't invite so and so, you're going to cause some really bad conflict at work and some hurt. You want to check if the employee hasn't told everybody what they're dealing. then you need to make sure as a supervisor you're helping navigate that. So their privacy is still respected, but that they're being not excluded and included in a way that works for them. It can be tricky to navigate, still very important. Same with any other happy news. It's still important to have these celebrations. It does reflect our workplace culture. Does the loss at work? Let's say that maybe an employee died at the workplace, or maybe you lost a coworker. It's part of our culture and how we handle that. If we act like Wells Fargo did, in that case I mentioned earlier, it sends a message that we are not seeing our employees and their needs as human beings. We need to see them as people, and we need to show that we see them as people. So things like making room for them to attend a funeral, even though it's not a close relation, maybe you might have a bereavement policy that doesn't cover colleagues, but being flexible where you can, saying, hey, we recognize that this person you worked with is important to you. You spend 30, 40 hours a week with them. We want to accommodate who can go to the funeral they'd like to go. It's really important to do that. It shows that you care, that you recognize the humans, and that you're recognizing this loss. By not doing that, you're saying this coworker that died doesn't matter, and y'all all working here don't matter. You never want to send that message. Sharing resources with employees. We sometimes are doing work with employees that have lost somebody. Sometimes I'm going out to a company where they've lost somebody and doing debriefings or support groups. Depending on where you work, that can be very helpful. If you ever need that, just reach out to your business consultant and we will form a plan for your company that fits with your culture and needs. Sometimes we're doing Zoom. Sometimes I'm right there on site. Sometimes I'm just checking in with one on one. Sometimes I'm doing groups. Always acknowledge the loss and let people talk about it. Now, this can be a little tricky. Sometimes the loss is anticipatory loss, such as an employee having a terminal illness, or sometimes it's because they were let go. That can be hard because when we let someone go, we don't want to make a big production of it. It's still something employees need to grieve. So if you avoid mentioning it at all or tell people we can't discuss it, you're sending a message about our values and how we value our employees. So you always want to handle that a little delicately. So this is a slide I've used before, but these are things we don't want to say. These are things that will absolutely hurt. I do not recommend ever saying them to someone that's grieving. And I will be giving out copies of these slides to everyone that's attending today or signed up. So if there's something that you're like, oh, I want to remember that, know that you're going to get copies. Again, these are just things to never say, particularly focused on work. So someone asked earlier about what if I have someone that is struggling? What you really want to do if you have someone that's struggling with doing their job. If you say something like, I know you're going through a hard time, but we need you to focus when you're at work. I know that you got divorced and it's really a lot of pressure under, but you messed this up and I need you to get it together. Now, I'm not saying we should ignore when an employee is messing up or causing harm. We need to address those things. But this is where we want to be a little flexible if we can. So, where we can be flexible is things like, I've noticed you've been struggling. Is there something I can do to help? It is a good idea to do some coaching and counseling, sometimes putting them on a PIP, but making sure that if you're doing that you're doing it with respect and consideration. There are some things that if someone messes up, you can't just ignore it. It's true. But that also means you have to take the time to talk with that employee directly and with respect for what they're dealing with. So that could be something like, hey, I know you're having a hard time. Your mom passed 3 months ago. I know you're still adjusting to things. Tell me how that's going. It sounds like it's going really rough. Is there anything we can do to help? We've noticed that your performance is slipping, and we want to be supportive. But this is impacting our clients. This is impacting some of the people that depend on you. And so we're concerned. How can we meet in the middle and make it a conversation, not a debate, a real conversation about, hey, I do care. I also got to take care of our company. Help me help you. Tell me what we can do. And within reason. Certainly, you're not going to say, okay, well, you just don't have to work at all. That's rarely an option. But the more you talk to them with respect for what they're dealing with, the more likely you're going to affect not only the company culture, but this employee feeling like, hey, they recognize I'm screwing up or messing up on something, but they're trying to work with me. It goes a long, long way. Don't say it's inconvenient timing. I know a lot of people that they mean it as a joke, they mean it with friendliness. Don't say it. It just makes them feel crappy and like you're not listening or caring. Grief has no timeline. Do not say things like that was 5 months ago. That was a year ago. Aren't you over it by now? And this is the one I get mostly from supervisors, usually bigwigs. But people take advantage of bereavement leave. That's why I need a strict policy. That's why I need proof that someone died. Now, I get it. I really do. I have my own team that I have to look after. But when you're saying things like that, even if they have some truth to them, what you're saying for your company culture is that most of your employees will take advantage and lie. You never want to send that message. Always make it personal and genuine. It's better to say, hey, our current policy for bereavement leave is this. Let's take a look at what we can do and look at what you can do. Sometimes the answer is you can't do anything, but still take the time to look. Take the time to hear the employee out. Take the time to see what's possible. Even that makes a big difference in the culture and how your employee is going to feel about you, how your coworkers are going to feel about you. Yes, everyone will get a copy of the slides. We always send those out. What to say? I'm sorry you're hurting right now. This sounds like a lot for you to handle. Would you like comfort or advice? I'd really like to help you out. Is there something I can do to help? I'm sorry. I want to make it better, but I don't know what to say. I do want to let you know I'm here for you. If it's a colleague or supervisee, it really can be things like, hey, I know you're having trouble focusing in meetings. Do we need to really look at doing minutes in our meetings to help people know what they're missing? Will that help you? Within reason. Again, you can't necessarily do everything, but look at what you can do. Hey, I noticed that you're having trouble keeping up on your part of the project. I can't really do your part. What can we do? It really just helps to have that dialogue and respect. If you are the person grieving, it's really important to communicate with your work. I know it can be uncomfortable, and as I mentioned earlier, maybe you have a workplace culture that doesn't feel comfortable in telling people, hey, I'm struggling right now. Hey, I'm dealing with a loss. It really does help, though, if your work knows what you're dealing with. We kind of talked earlier if, you're starting to mess up at work and you end up on an employee improvement program. Oof, not good. But your workplace can be a lot more understanding if they know that you're struggling. It does not look good if you only say, by the way, I'm grieving, when they say, hey, you messed this up, and you didn't do this correctly. What's going on? You really need to let them know before it gets there. It just builds better trust between you and your employer. It also means that maybe you can get the support before there's a big problem. Unfortunately, sometimes some of the employees that I'm helping here at Blomquist Hale, some of them come from companies where when they mess up, it's too big of a mess up for them to stay employed. And that's really sad. It breaks my heart every time. But that's why you have to work with your employer. You have to be open about what's going on within reason. It's also important to understand everyone's going to want to help. If you just say, I'm fine, I don't need anything, that's dandy. I get that. Good for you. But your employer, your coworkers are going to still ask because they want to help you. They want to help it be better. Now, they can't fix it. It's better to give them something to do, or they're going to decide what they think will help. And sometimes they will really mess it up. They'll say some of those phrases I mentioned earlier. They will cover a shift that you didn't need covered. So it's better to say, hey, I am struggling. It would really help me if you kind of followed up with me after meetings on anything I need to do, because I've been forgetful lately. Hey, I really don't want to talk about what I'm feeling, but you know what? I would love to hear about those issues with your kid because that's going to give me a great distraction. I really don't need your help with this work project, but what I could really use is some of those chocolate chip cookies that you make. Would you be willing to make me a batch? This helps them feel like they're being helpful so they don't hover or try to help in ways you don't want. I know it's frustrating, but if you don't give them something to do, they're gonna guess, and most will guess wrong. Okay. If someone else has read one of my favorite books, it's okay that you're not okay. These are all resources. These are articles. Some of them are on things to say in grief. Some are on grief specifically in the workplace. Some are on bereavement leave. Like I said, I don't really feel qualified to tell all of you what your workplace policy should be. Every workplace is different. Now, if you ever do want to discuss specifics, especially if you're a leader, let us know. That is something we do here at Blomquist Hale. We do leadership counseling. And by that, we're sitting with leaders in workplaces and saying, hey, let's talk this situation out and figure it out together. Sometimes it's just nice to do that. So that's something you need for a specific situation. Please give us a call and make an appointment.